Well, I wasn't going to do it, but Pastor Benton was mentioning a lot about their cat Holly this morning, and I thought about ripping up my sermon and talking about, giving that uncomfortable talk to your children, but I didn't know if that extended to our cats or not, so I didn't rip up my sermon, so I thought I'd just go with what I did, but I thought I did have to take a jab while I could, too. Well, just to kind of review a little bit, I don't know who all was here or wasn't here last week, but we just started our first lesson that I'm going to do out of a 3-part series on just the importance of a family. And last week we just talked about just simple things like the importance of a family and how we are shaped and cared for by our family. How God, our Creator, intentionally designed family in our lives, that we are all a part of a family, and a lot of times we wear a lot of different roles or different hats within that family. And then outside of God, our family knows us best. They will know the true us because they get to see us whenever we don't have any kind of false front that we put on. Out of anybody in this world, the people that you will probably influence the most is your family. It's probably the biggest stage that you or I will ever have. And the last point that I made is that you will impact your family no matter what. And this point is a point that I really wanted to expound on tonight and next Sunday evening when we'll look at some people from the Bible and how they impacted their family, okay? Now, as a side note, my intent is not to belittle these people because I am just as fallible as these, and our God of mercy extends his love to them just as he does to me. But I do want to merely learn from their mistakes or the things that they did right, and seeing the gravity of their actions and how it impacted their family, and pray not to repeat these same mistakes. So tonight, I wanted to start with the negative, okay? You always want to do the negative first and end on a high note. So tonight will be the negative impacts, okay? When I think about people recorded in the Bible and their negative impacts from some choices that they made or mistakes in their lives, you start going back and you start with Adam and Eve and you think about their disobedience in the garden. And then I think about Cain with his stubborn jealousy that led him to murder. I think about Lot, his decision to settle his family near a wicked city of Sodom. Then he became actively involved with the city council at Sodom, and he lost his testimony before his family, and eventually he committed incest with his daughters. I think about Jacob showing favoritism to Joseph, which flamed jealousy with his brothers. And really, you could really go on and look at the way that people impacted people in their family. But tonight, I want to just look at 2 different examples. I want to look at David and I want to look at Eli. And I want to look at some of the choices that they made and how it impacted their family. When I was trying to think about, well, let's pray. We'll start us off with prayer, okay? Dear God, I just pray, Lord, I thank you for your word. I thank you that we have accounts, Lord, of other people that loved you and other people that wanted to live for you, Lord. And God, that we have accounts of both good and bad things of them, Lord, that we can understand and we can study and we can learn from them. And I pray, God, in looking at these examples, Lord, that we would not become arrogant in our minds and think that we would not do things in a negative aspect that would impact our family, Lord, but that, God, we would just learn from it and take heed from it, Lord, I pray. Pray that you would help me to just be able to give my thoughts, Lord, in a way that would be honoring and pleasing to you. I pray in your name, amen. So I was trying to think of an introduction tonight, and I didn't think of any good stories growing up, although I have a few more, but I want to keep a few in my belt for later. But I started thinking about a family that I love and admire, a musculoskeletal family called the shoulder girdle, okay? Now, I didn't make up their name, so you can laugh at girdle, but I used to be a physical therapist, and so we studied muscles and bones and all that good stuff and how they impacted each other. And I thought about the shoulder girdle and how it paints a good picture how multiple members of a family impact its overall function. And then I got thinking about all the things I do in the day, and one of the most important things that I do in the morning when I get up is I open up the cupboard and I reach up and I grab my coffee mug so I can fill it up with some beautiful juice. And I start thinking about studying all the members of that shoulder girdle family and what they do. And there's a lot of them, okay? There's bones, okay? You have your arm or your humerus. You have your shoulder blade or your scapula. You have your clavicle. Some of the muscles that are involved are your deltoids, your biceps, the supra and infraspinatus, the teres minor and major, the serratus anterior, the latissimus dorsi, the rhomboids major and minor, the levator scapula, the upper, middle, lower trapezius, and all the other supporting casts of the nerves and the blood supplies, the vessels that all goes to them, just to allow me to be able to reach up and grab that cup of coffee. Now, in studying the shoulder girdle, you realize there's a lot of things that go on that we don't even think about. When you start to raise your arm, your deltoids start to contract and they raise your arm up like this. But while it is doing that, your rotator cuff holds your humerus in place and it kind of rotates it a little bit to clear so you don't hit your tendon underneath on your scapula. Then your shoulder blade starts to rotate up so you can get that last few degrees of stretch. And as you're reaching for something, your shoulder blade has to be able to stabilize and stay right where it needs to stay so that you can do the things that it needs to do. Now, the interesting thing is all of those have to happen in a certain order. They all have to be good and they have to be viable. They have to be nourished by the blood. They have to get the message that's sent to them from your central nervous system, and they have to have the timing just right. But it's interesting. You have 4 muscles that are your rotator cuff muscles. That's the one we hear about the most because it's the one that people bang up the most, okay? But those muscles have to be able to turn my arm like this, and they have to be able to hold it onto my shoulder while I do stuff up there. Now, those 4 muscles, they cannot raise my arm. That's not their job. It's not their function. They will never be able to raise my arm. They can never use the excuse and blame themselves for not being able to raise the arm because it's not what they do. But if they don't work properly, they start to really beat up your shoulder where people start getting torn rotator cuffs. They start getting bursitis in there. You can't raise your arm as much. The only thing that the rotator cuff muscles can do is the job that they're supposed to do. Rotate my arm and hold it close up to my humerus. But they cannot use the excuse of my deltoids say, I'm just not going to work for you today, Jay. You're not going to get your coffee cup. They can't, the deltoid can't say it's the rotator cuff's fault. Everybody has their own sole function. But what I want to get out of it here is everybody's function impacts the unit as a whole, okay? And that's the same way within our families. We all impact the function of our family. I cannot blame what someone else does or if Dara decides to do something wicked or sinful, I can't take the blame for that. That's her choice to make that choice. But it will impact me. But I also can passively just choose to not accept the role that I'm supposed to do. Like my rotator cuff say, I'm just not going to do what I'm supposed to do. I just don't feel like doing it anymore. And it can just let the deltoid just sloppily just raise your arm up and down and just beat up your shoulder and tear it up until the shoulder girdle family is no good anymore. And that's what can happen with us. We can take, and in our lives, we can get to the point where we just negate our sole function of what God has given us. God has given me a function within my family that no one else has. And God has given you a function within your family that only you have. And what he wants us to do is to do it faithfully and do it the way that he wants us to do it. So tonight, I want to look at 2 illustrations, like I had mentioned, David and Eli. And when I look at these, I look at one illustration of an active decision and one is a passive decision. Okay, and the first one being David as an active decision, meaning he chose to do something and how it impacted his family. So I want you to turn over to 2 Samuel. And when you get a chance, we're not going to read through everything. These are very good Bible accounts to go back and look through. But I think we are all very familiar in 2 Samuel chapter 11. 2 Samuel 11 through 13, basically it gives the account of David's lust for and his sin with Bathsheba, which leads to David's attempt but failed cover-up with Uriah, Bathsheba's husband, and ultimately his planned indirect murder of Uriah. It also gives the impact that David's sin had on his family because of God's judgment of David's sin. As a side note, though, too, when you get a chance, when you read in chapters 2 Samuel 11 through 13, go over to Psalms 51 at some point in time and see David's repentant heart toward his sin and also how God dealt with him mercifully. But when David sinned with Bathsheba, it had an impact on his family, okay? The impact was such as this: the death of his son to Bathsheba. He brought in evil and unrest within his family for all the rest of his life. His firstborn son, Amnon, raped his half-sister, Tamar, and that's what we're going to focus on a little bit later. His other son, Absalom, then murdered Amnon as revenge. We see a fractured and ruined relationship between a father and son and David and Absalom, with Absalom attempting to kill and overthrow David as king and also sleeping with many of David's concubines. That was a public humiliation to David because David's sin with Bathsheba became public and disgraceful to God. David's authority as king would be severely damaged, and Absalom would ultimately die in his attempt to overthrow David. But tonight what I want to look at, I want to back up to, I want to go to chapter 13, and I want to look at the impact of David's sin on his son Amnon. So I just want to read the account here, and we'll go over it. Chapter 13, verses 1 through 14. But it says, "And it came to pass after this that Absalom, the son of David, had a fair sister, whose name was Tamar, and Amnon, the son of David, loved her. And Amnon was so vexed that he fell sick for his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin. And Amnon thought it hard for him to do anything to her. But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shimeah, David's brother. And Jonadab was a very subtle man. And he said unto him, Why art thou, being the king's son, lean from day to day? Wilt thou not tell me? And Amnon said unto him, I love Tamar, my brother, Absalom's sister. And Jonadab said unto him, Lay thee down on thy bed, and make thyself sick, and when thy father cometh to see thee, say unto him, I pray thee, let my sister Tamar come, and give me meat, and dress the meat in my sight, that I might see it, and eat it at her hand. So Amnon lay down, and made himself sick. And when the king was come to see him, Amnon said unto the king, I pray thee, let Tamar my sister come, and make a couple of cakes in my sight, that I might eat at her hand. Then David sent home to Tamar, saying, Go now to thy brother Amnon's house, and dress him meat. So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house, and he laid down, and she took flour and kneaded it, and made cakes in his sight, and did bake the cakes. And she took a pan and poured them out before him. But he refused to eat. And Amnon said, Have out all the men from me. And they went out every man from him. And Amnon said unto Tamar, Bring the meat into the chamber, that I might eat of thine hand. And Tamar took the cakes which she had made, and brought them into the chamber to Amnon her brother. And when she had brought them unto him to eat, he took hold of her and said unto her, Come, lie with me, my sister. And she said, Nay, my brother, do not force me, For no such thing ought to be done in Israel. Do not thou this folly. And I, whither shall I cause my shame to go? And as for thee, thou shalt be as one of the fools in Israel. Now therefore I pray thee, speak unto the king, for he will not withhold me from thee. Howbeit he would not hearken unto her voice, but being stronger than she, forced her, and lay with her. And the rest of the chapter goes on to proceed to say about how Amnon continued to proceed and act on his wicked lust for Tamar and raped her. And then basically he got enraged with her and became angry with her and basically kicked her out. And I go back to this account and I read this wicked account and I sit there and I think, I wonder how much Amnon, when he witnessed, I don't know how much he witnessed of David's sin. The Bible doesn't give us an account. I do know that he was born then. I know that he was living then. Did he hear stories of it? It was a public thing that had happened. But it's very interesting to me because I feel like the impact that it had on Amnon. Now, Amnon made his own decision. He sinned on his own. But the impact that his dad's choice and his dad's sin made on him. Listen to the similarities in their sins between him and David. Both of their sin was driven by lust. David desired Bathsheba and acted on that desire despite knowing that she was another man's wife. Amnon desired Tamar, his half-sister, and became obsessed with fulfilling his sinful desire. Both abused their position of power. David used the authority of his king to summon Bathsheba, and Amnon used his position as the king's son and deception to isolate Tamar. Both involved sexual sin, David committing adultery with Bathsheba and Amnon committing rape against Tamar. Both of these men ignored righteous and self-control. Neither resisted their temptation. Their actions showed disregard for God's law and the dignity of the women involved. Both involved secrecy and manipulation. David tried to cover up his adultery and arrange Uriah's death. Amnon manipulated circumstances through his friend's advice to trap Tamar. Both caused deep harm to others. David's sin led to Uriah's death, Bathsheba's suffering, and turmoil in Israel. Amnon's sin devastated Tamar and shattered the royal family. Both sins brought family judgment and conflict. After David's sin, God declared that violence would arise within David's own house. Amnon's actions directly contributed to that judgment that was pronounced on David. And it also led to Absalom then murdering Amnon. I think about that situation, and I think about how David's impact and what Amnon saw in that, and to what degree that David's decision to just disregard God and to just sin actively, and how it impacted his family, and how sad it is that to think about his firstborn son would commit such an act that was so similar to it. Both were distinctly solely responsible for their actions. But you can see how one impacted the other. David made an active decision and it impacted his family. The second illustration I want to look at is a passive decision. Turn back to 1 Samuel. But Eli, in 1 Samuel chapter 1, chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you can read that some on your own, gives the history of Eli. He was a high priest at the tabernacle in Shiloh and also served as a judge in the time of judges in Israel's history for 40 years. He had two sons. His sons' names were Hophni and Phinehas. When you think about Hophni and Phinehas, that would be kind of like a modern-day preacher's kid or missionary's kid, okay? They took part as they should be trained up in performing the duties of the priestly duties of the tabernacle there. They took part in the animal sacrifices. Sorry, I lost my place. They were basically raised in church, kind of like our missionary kids and pastors' kids. They were raised in church, okay? They would have known the things that they were supposed to do to perform their task. But somehow the importance and the reverence for performing those tasks was either not conveyed, or at least their performance and their duties were not overseen correctly by Eli. Eli passively parented his sons. So their sins, if you look over in chapter 2, verse 12, it says, "Now the sons of Eli were sons of Belial. They knew not the Lord." In verse 13 through 60 goes on to tell us about some of their sins. It says, And the priest's custom with the people was that when any man offered sacrifice, the priest's servants came while the flesh was in seething, with a flesh hook of 3 teeth in his hand, and he struck it into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot. All that the flesh hook brought up, the priest took for himself. So they did in Shiloh unto all the Israelites that came thither. Also before they burnt the fat, the priest's servants came and said to the man that sacrificed, "Give flesh to roast for the priest, for he will not have sodden flesh of thee, but raw." And if any man said unto him, "Let them not fail to burn the fat presently, and then take as much as thy soul desireth," then he would answer him, "Nay, but thou shalt give it to me now, and if not, I will take it by force." Phinehas and Hophni, when people would bring up their sacrifices, their meat sacrifices, God designed a system of what the priests were supposed to have. They were supposed to have the right thigh or the breast of the sacrifice. That was to be theirs. It was a way that God used to pay them. Well, Phinehas and Hophni devised a system where they would just go and they would take any of the meat that was being brought for a sacrifice. And not only that, a lot of times they would, before the offering would be put on the burnt offering, and the fat would be burned off as a symbol to God of the fat, of giving back the fat or the riches of what he blessed them with, they would take it from these people and they would demand that meat from them. They wanted it raw. I don't know whether they wanted it raw because then they were storing it up for themselves, or whether they were taking it to the market and selling it, but they were basically feeding their bellies, and they were getting really rich based off of their sins, of what they would do. And it got to be so bad that in verse 17 it says, "Wherefore the sins of the young men was very great before the Lord, for men abhorred the offering of the Lord." Their sins got so bad that people started hating coming to church anymore. They hated coming and doing what they should do, serving God and bringing their sacrifices before the Lord, because of what their sons were doing and their sins, what they were doing. In verse 22, it also reports that they were also sleeping with many of the women that would come to the temple, using their power of position to their advantage. All this was going on for a period of time. The Bible doesn't tell us exactly how long it was going on, but it was all going on right under Eli's nose. That his sons were not performing the duties the way they should. In fact, they were using it to their advantage. But as it goes on to say a little bit later in the chapters, it alludes to the fact that Eli was also kind of prospering basically on this. Eli was also kind of benefiting from this. I don't know if it was from the actual meat. I don't know if it was from the money that was made when they sold some of the meat. But Eli was benefiting from this as well. And he chose to turn his eye. He chose to passively interject on them. We do see in verses 22 through 25 of chapter 2 that Eli, he has an account of when his sons are a little bit older that he does scold them, but it's almost a little pathetic, and it was apparently too little too late. If you read chapter 2, let's read verse 27. God sends judgment to Eli for his passive parenting and for his overlooking what his sons are doing. And it says, verse 27, "And therefore came a man from God unto Eli and said unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Did I plainly appear unto the house of thy father when they were in Egypt in Pharaoh's house? And did I choose him out of all the tribes of Israel to be my priest, to offer upon mine altar, to burn incense, to wear an ephod, and before me?" He's basically saying, did I not choose Aaron and all of his descendants to be the priests? He's like, I put you, you are in this position because I set this up. And it says, "And did I give unto thy house, the house of thy father, all the offerings made by fire of the children of Israel?" He's saying, did I not provide for you? Your job was to be the priest and do the priestly duties. I provided for you. I set this up for you. "Wherefore kick ye at my sacrifice and at mine offering, which I have commanded in my habitation, and honorest thy sons above me?" Do you get that? Eli honored his sons more than God. Family is important. Family is very important. But family does not trump God and what God tells you to do. When your love for your family is more than your love for your God, that's when you're getting into trouble. And that's what happened with Eli here. He became passive in his parenting because he loved his sons. "And to make yourselves fat with the chiefest of all the offerings of Israel, my people." Not only did he love his sons more than he loved God, but he also was getting fat and happy off of it. You think about it. Sometimes it's easy for us to love our family, our kids, more than anything. And it's easy, too, because it's like, man, I just enjoy some of the fatness and the luxuries of this life. And I'm just going to, if I have to kind of get onto my kids and parent them, it's just not going to be as great. Life is not going to be as great. He says, let me see in verse 29, 30. "Wherefore the Lord God of Israel saith, I said indeed that thy house and the house of thy father should walk before me forever. But now the Lord saith," he's like, look, I promised Aaron, this is going to be the tribe that's going to be the priesthood. He's like, but now, "Be it far from me, for them that honor me I will honor, and they that despise me shall be lightly esteemed." Eli's judgment for his passive parenting, I'm not going to read it right now, but you read verses 31 through 36. Eli's family line would be no longer serve as priests in the tabernacle, a duty which was historically passed on from generation to generation. And not only that, God said that both of his sons would die on the same day in their youth. And God took from Eli what he loved most. And when I think about these two men in the Bible, there are other things that they did that were good things. It's not like their whole life or their whole resume was bad. But when you look at some of these accounts, when I read David's account and I read about Amnon, it makes me sick to my stomach thinking about it. And when you look at what Eli did and how he made people, his sons made the church and the tabernacle a place where people didn't even want to go to it. One man, David, decided to he made a decision actively, and it impacted his family. Another man decided passively, I'm not going to do anything. And my point is, in your family, you will impact them. Whether you choose to be intentional and do it in the right way, or whether you choose to be passive and just say, I'm not going to do it. And as I read through these passages, I just sit and I think to myself, are there active sinful decisions in my life that I'm choosing now? Or am I passively content to overlook God-given responsibilities in my family because I love them more than God, or I just want to be fat and happy in this world? And I just pray, like I said, I'm not any better and you're not any better than these men that we're given account of in the Bible. But God gave these accounts for us that we would learn from them and we would see the impact of what we do. You can only do your role within a family, but you can do it faithfully. You can continue to get nourished from God and to grow in God and to be the best part of the family that you're responsible to be. Next week, we'll get on a little happy note of an impact of someone in a positive way on their family.